Okay, now we've got longtime guest Elex Michaelson, the anchor for Fox LA and the host of The Issue Is. Elex, thanks for joining.
Brian, great to be with you. Grateful that you were on with us on The Issue Is this week, and nice to
return the favor.
Return the favor,
All right,
exactly.
Well, let's get into it because we've had a pretty busy week, especially as Republican primary politics go. So as of now, Ron DeSantis is in, Vivek Ramaswamy is in, Tim Scott is in, Nikki Haley is in. We maybe have Chris Christie on the horizon, Chris Sununu on the horizon, Mike Pence on the horizon. The Republican field is starting to look a lot like it did in 2016. Do you think they're falling into the exact same trap as they did 2 elections ago?
They are falling in the exact same trap as they were 2 elections ago. The only way to beat Donald Trump in the Republican primary is to have one person mano a mano with Donald Trump and to be the alternative. To do what they're doing now sets up the same result, because the way Republicans nominate candidates is different than the way the Democrats nominate candidates. Republicans have winner-take-all primaries. Democrats have proportional representation. So if you and me and somebody else, we're all running and say, I got 25% and you got 28% and Bernie Sanders got 30%, we each would get 25% of delegates, 28%. Republicans have a system where whoever gets the most gets all. So if Donald Trump, we know he's going to get 35%, right? I mean, he said if he shoots somebody on Fifth Avenue, his supporters would still be with him. And that's pretty much proven out to be true, right? No matter what. And him getting criminally indicted helps him. His poll numbers go up. So there's more indictments coming. That's probably going to be a boost in his numbers.
Yeah.
So that's not going somewhere. So another candidate has to get 40% of the vote, right, to beat Donald Trump. And right now, if you got 7-8 people splitting the vote, that's not really possible.
Well, I mean, you'd mentioned mano a mano. I'm assuming like general conventional wisdom right now says that guy would have to be Ron DeSantis. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like Nikki Haley is going to be the person to be able to take down Trump. Do you think that Ron DeSantis, judging by everything that you've read, everything you've seen of him thus far, is he going to be the guy?
We don't know. I mean, so far, Ron DeSantis' entrance has not been especially impressive to the conventional wisdom beltway, pundits. A lot of people sort of laughed at what happened with Twitter, with him unable to make his announcement on Twitter because they can't start the software, and it sort of sounded like a 56K modem starting up. But months and months down the road, most of that's probably going to be forgotten. If you look historically at the way these things work, at this point in previous elections, oftentimes the person that you think is going to be the big winner is not. So there is going to be a lot that happens between now and then. Obviously, DeSantis has not started to attack Trump, which is something you've criticized him for. But that could come in the coming months. Most people are not paying that close attention to this stuff yet. When they do, what Ron DeSantis is going to be there, we don't know. We know what Donald Trump's going to be there. We know what he looks like. We don't really know what Ron DeSantis is going to be there. Or is there somebody else among this other field that turns out to be especially impressive that we're not giving that much attention to right now?
Do you have any predictions on who that might be? Or do you think that we haven't seen that person yet?
Well, we know that Chris Christie is really good on a debate stage. Right? We know that he is a terrific TV performer and will probably try to go at Trump very intensely.
Yeah.
So if he's up there, he might be able to land some punches. Whether he becomes the Republican nominee, very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
He also can be effective at landing punches on somebody else.
But that would just serve to clear the field for Trump.
Trump's ideal thing is that all these other candidates, in trying to be the anti-Trump, end up punching each other and not punching Trump, in which case Trump is able to skate away with the nomination. And it is in Trump's favor to have this. There was a New York Times report that Trump, when Tim Scott came into the race recently, said, let's say nice things about him. Basically, because it's in Trump's interest for Tim Scott to be in the race. And so help him up a little bit.
To that point, I mean, you've had the chance to speak with a number of these Republican candidates. You've spoken with Mike Pence, who, again, is likely to announce his candidacy. You've spoken with Larry Elder recently. That was just this past week on your show. Does it seem like any of them are actually willing to distinguish themselves from Trump? And I ask because, like, it would seem to defy logic if you're running against a guy who thus far has consolidated all of or most of the support in the Republican primary. It would seem to defy logic if you're not willing to distinguish yourself from the guy who's winning right now. Otherwise, what's the difference?
Well, it seems like there's two different approaches to this. One approach seems to be the DeSantis approach, which is I'm Trumpism without the indictments.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And basically you can have all the policies you like because most Republicans like the policies, but you don't have the drama and the tweets and the chaos and the insurrection and the criminal prosecutions, right? That seems to be one approach. But so far that approach doesn't seem to really be working. Another approach is like Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, is distinguishing himself from Trump. He's criticizing him on a lot of the things that he's done. He's blatantly by name going after him. And so far, I don't know what the opposite of catching fire in a primary would be, but cooling down or whatever. He seems to be in an ice bath in terms of the poll numbers right now. So, you know, although you're saying logic might say that that's the right approach, people that have tried that, Liz Cheney, you know, didn't exactly have tremendous success in the Republican Party by going after Trump by name and being really, you know, principled.
They're
about
kind of
it.
in this impossible catch-22 because if you speak out against Trump, then you're going to get killed by the entire base, and the base voters are going to be who ultimately determines who the Republican nominee is. Or if if you opt for the opposite, then you get excommunicated. You get stuck in your ice bath like Asa Hutchinson is.
Right. So there doesn't seem to be a clear path so far but there is, I mean, it is also true, although we talk about Trump's strong base, there is also a strong base of Republicans that are sick of him.
But when you say strong base, I mean, are we not overestimating the sheer number of people who actually are? Because here's the thing. You have to think about getting out of the Republican primary first. So there might be within the Republican Party more broadly, like writ large, the Republican Party, or even those Republican-leaning independents who, of course, may be anti-Trump. And we've seen the vast majority of them are. But in terms of Republican base voters, the people who are paying attention right now, the people who are going to determine who that Republican nominee is, that's an entirely separate story. And so it's hard for us to just kind of perpetuate this idea that there are this vast number of people who are anti-Trump when, like, this group of people, the people who are actually going to determine the nominee for the general election, aren't.
Well, yeah, but I don't think at this point there's that many people that are going to be joining Trump that haven't joined him already, right? I mean, there's not like a lot of undecideds about what you get with Donald Trump. So that means that all the don't know and everybody else, if you add all them together, that probably is enough to beat Donald Trump. The problem is right now, you can't add all that together. And people don't vote for hypotheticals. People vote for people. They vote for candidates. And there needs to be a candidate that distinguishes him or herself in order to beat the king. And right now, Donald Trump is still king.
Yeah. Well, we're eventually going to get to the point where we have to, get to the general election contest. It's like most likely, and we've spoken about this on your show in just this past week, but it'll most likely be Joe Biden and Donald Trump as of right now. If we were to take a snapshot of what we're looking at right now, that's who it's going to be. I've gone back and forth about who I think would be a better opponent for Joe Biden, but, on one hand, when it comes to Trump, he will have extra baggage in 2024. It's not just the fact that he's already lost to Joe Biden in 2020, but now he'll have all. No, he did.
He did?
Just making sure that we all.
Okay. All right.
So it's not just the fact that he lost to Biden in 2020. He'll also have all of that extra baggage that is, this wave of indictments that are coming down upon him, starting from the Manhattan DA's office and most likely in Fulton County, most likely at the DOJ for the classified documents case, maybe the January 6th case, and on and on. On the other hand, we've also seen firsthand what happens when the media just anoints a Democrat the winner versus Donald Trump, and we end up with President Donald Trump, like what happened in 2016. So I'm curious what your thoughts on this topic are in terms of who would be a better opponent for Joe Biden as we head into 2024.
Well, Donald Trump is both the weakest and the strongest opponent for Joe Biden. He is the weakest opponent because There are millions and millions and millions of Americans that are over him, that don't want to touch him. And all of the last elections show that there is a segment of Republicans that when he's associated with them do worse than Republicans who are not.
Almost like expressly and specifically, like just those, like exclusively.
Just
rather.
him.
Yeah. Like
And so
his endorsed MAGA candidates for Secretary of State and governor's races in every swing state. He lost every single one of those races when he endorsed a specific candidate.
Right. So that's not a great sign for him.
Not a great sign.
And that would be the argument for him being the weakest. But him being the strongest, he's really, really compelling on TV, whether you like him or you don't. He brings people to the table. He gets people excited. He gets people talking about stuff. He knows how to work a crowd. He knows how to manipulate the media. He knows how to dominate a stage. He looks like the most alpha person out there, and he has for years. He still does. I mean, you see that CNN town hall, he like ramroded over that whole thing.
Yeah.
And so, he has the ability to do that. And for people, if it just becomes a one versus the other and they're sort of frustrated, or maybe they feel like Joe Biden's too old and he looks kind of weak and Trump looks really strong, I think there are some people that vote just based off of gut reactions
just
like
vibes.
that. They don't read that much. They don't get that nuance into the policy. They don't really know the policy that much. They're just like, this isn't working for me. I want something else. And if Trump's the guy, because ultimately it becomes one versus one, in the general election, he's got a fitting chance at doing it. I mean, Trump is more compelling as a figure than any of the Republican candidates are in terms of just, you necessarily want to watch him. Most of the other guys look boring and small next to him. And his whole thing about nicknames and belittling and all that, which drives liberals crazy, also is really good at garnering views.
Yeah. Do you think that Trump has any incentive to actually debate any of those other people? He hinted toward this idea that he may not debate Ron DeSantis in a recent clip. He came out and basically said, we'll see, or maybe not. Maybe there might not even be any reason to get on the debate stage. And so he's obviously introducing or teasing this idea that there may not be an incentive for him because, he is the presumptive nominee as of right now. So do you think that there is an incentive for him to do that?
Well, do you think Donald Trump likes being on TV?
Yeah, I have some feelings about that.
Have you gotten the impression that maybe he enjoys being in front of the camera?
He has skipped out on these debates in the past.
He skipped out on one.
On one, but and he did, and
made a big show of it.
Made a big show of it, and he ended up doing a town hall, right?
On
or
TV
a rally. Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah.
So politically, might it be beneficial for him to not? Maybe, but with that ego, you think he wants to watch all these guys on stage and everybody talking about them and him not be part of the party?
Yeah.
I mean, he also has great confidence in his ability to be one-upping these guys and be a showman and make them all look small. So, I can't imagine him. Maybe he doesn't do every debate, but I feel like he's probably does at least one or two. And if after that he shows them all up and his poll numbers are high and they all look kind of small next to him, then I think he may have said, I've said what I have to say, and I move on.
Do you think that Joe Biden has any incentive to debate Trump then?
No.
Do you think he will?
I don't think if it's Trump versus Biden, I don't think there's going to be a presidential debate, which is sad as somebody who loves debates, who wants to host a presidential debate one day as a dream job, who organized the LA mayor's debate and the sheriff's debate and governor's debates and trying to organize a Senate debate. I love debates. I'm all about debates. I think debates are important. I think that's really beneficial to society. But I can't figure out if you're Trump or you're Biden, what would be the incentive to debate the other person other than, the fact that there's value in debates? Because Biden,
I don't think either one of them are doing it for the inherent value in debates.
Right.
I think they would look for their specific incentives.
Self-interest. So if you're Biden and you are older and you run the risk of maybe making a mistake that probably gets blown out of proportion because people are looking for reasons to do that, it's a giant risk. And you know that Trump is not really big on facts and sort of runs over people and doesn't play by the rules. What confidence do you have that he's going to? And if you're Trump, and you're now one-on-one on stage with the president, and you've got to face off against a moderator who's probably going to call you on a lot of the things that you've said that are just not truthful, and you run the risk of looking small or looking dumb. What's your incentive to doing that?
Republicans are trying to shoehorn this idea of Biden's age being the preeminent issue in this election into the forefront here. From your perspective, is that argument persuasive, or do you think that people are recognizing that this election will be a choice between two people? And so it's not just this idea of Biden's age in a vacuum. It's going to be him, yes, as the oldest president we've ever had, but against a lunatic like Donald Trump.
Well, I listened to a podcast a few weeks ago that told me that this debate was settled.
That's right.
So I guess the issue is off the table now.
We will temporarily put it back on the table.
It's back on the table.
Yeah,
okay, so now we got to talk about it. I thought it was over. Look, do I think that Biden's age, even if it is a contest between two people, that is a part of the decision for a lot of people. I mean, he's older. He is.
Yeah.
And the concept that should we have a president, because if he served out the whole next term at 86 years old, like, I think that's a legitimate discussion point. And yes, you could be say, okay, well, that's one thing, but I think Trump wants to end the republic and doesn't believe in democracy itself and has appointed a bunch of lunatics and is running on the concept of retribution. Maybe you say that's more important than the guy is a little old.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the guy being a little old is a legitimate issue to talk about.
Right.
And if Trump is not the nominee, which is possible, and Joe Biden is running against any of the rest of them, Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Tim Scott or any of these people who could be his son or daughter, it's going to make him look even older.
Yeah.
And that's really problematic for him. That's why Trump is uniquely, because he's close in age and he has all that baggage, it may not be as much of an issue against him, but it would be a huge issue against any of those other Republican nominees and really problematic for him.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. We've been in the midst of this debt ceiling fight for a few weeks now. I don't want to talk about the debt ceiling fight specifically because I know that we run the risk of whatever we say immediately becoming obsolete because of how fast things are moving right now. But more broadly, we have seen these far-right members of Congress, these House Freedom Caucus members, really make their presence known. They even put forward a threat for a motion to vacate against Kevin McCarthy that would basically put a vote to Congress, allowing them to rescind his speakership. How are these far-right Republicans, in your opinion, impacting the party's chances in this election? Like, do you think that it's largely to their detriment, or do you think that this is what the Republicans want to see more of? This sense of fight, of pushing back, of dragging their members as far to the right as they can?
Well, the problem in answering that is I don't know what the Republicans means.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of those members are doing what their constituents want to see. Most of those people are in very gerrymandered districts that are heavily Republican, heavily conservative media.
But then why, to that point, like, why not recognize that if you're in an R+30 district, but you want to keep your majority in the House, then why not moderate even just the slightest bit so that you can retain your House majority and not make it impossible for those 18 Republicans who are now sitting in Biden-carried districts to actually win so that you can hang on to your majority? Like, are they that short-sighted or that interested in just the momentary fundraising push that they can get from saying the farthest right thing possible that they're just completely ignoring the broader picture here?
Because they don't believe in government itself.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? So what incentive do they have to make government work when their whole brand is government is bullshit?
But they want to, it doesn't negate the fact that they still want to be in control of that government that they also don't believe in, that they also want to undermine at every turn. They want to be in control so that they have more power to actually be able to do that.
Do they? I mean, yes, they do. But ultimately, most of those people are, basically a chaos caucus.
Yeah.
They believe in chaos. Chaos is good. It's easier to, in some ways, for a lot of those people, it's probably easier not to be in control.
Yeah.
Like for many years, the ratings on Fox News Channel were higher when there was a Democratic president because then they could talk shit about that person.
Yeah.
The ratings on MSNBC were higher when there was a Republican president because people could come and tune into that. Most of those people, their whole brand is based off of fuck you, fuck that person. And so that's what they have. It works for them. Governing is fucking hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Well, you saw it took 15 votes just to pick a speaker for them.
To get a speaker. And so, and governing on like coming up with a budget and like actually having to agree on stuff. So it's easier to just say they suck, this is bad, no. When you actually have to say yes on something, that's really difficult. And so what McCarthy, I think, is seeing on this is in order to really do stuff, he has to work with Democrats to come to some sort of compromise. But when your whole brand is never compromise, the other side is not only wrong, but evil, and the government itself doesn't work, what incentive do you have to say, yes, let's find some nuanced deal that works for everybody?
Yeah, that's a great point. And also, these people don't really seem to be there for that reason. They seem to be there, most of them, the ones that are popular anyway, are there to build their brands. I mean, Ted Cruz does more content creation. Ted Cruz rivals the amount of content creation that I do. And the guy is supposed to be a U.S. senator representing, 30 million people? So I mean, to your point exactly, like this, the incentive does seem to be there just to do whatever it takes to build their brands at all costs, regardless of whether it means that they're going to pass legislation or not, so long as they can get views and subscribers or donations or whatever it is.
And I'm not suggesting that all Republicans fall in that camp. There are several good faith actors on the Republican side that have a different perspective on government, that don't think taxes should be so high, and that are trying to do the right thing. But there are some members that are bad faith actors who are not that interested in governing, and that's really challenging for Kevin McCarthy, who now has to govern.
Does that explain why, on the issue of abortion, we've seen, since this issue has come to the forefront because of the Dobbs decision being passed down, we've seen Republicans just get absolutely hammered, electorally speaking. So, and at the same time, they're still doubling down. We've got a 6-week abortion ban in Florida now. We've got abortion bans in South Carolina. And so even though this issue has been absolute kryptonite to them in the individual states, and even nationally speaking, still they continue to double down. So I guess to that same point, like, where is the rationality? Or is it just that they don't care? They don't care how much they break it. They've got control for this short bit of time, and they're going to use it and seize that power and do whatever they want with it, regardless of what happens in the future for this very moment now.
Well, on abortion, I mean, there are good faith actors who believe that abortion is murder.
But these people, and I hear you. I understand what they're saying, and they have this sliver of time where they can actually get this stuff passed, and so why not?
But if you believe that abortion is murder and that allowing it is a sin and that your sort of responsibility as a good Christian is to stop it, then that is more important than political poll numbers. Now, of course, there are craven political operators who have manipulated those people's fears to win elections for years and fundraise on the issue. But there are people that actually really do believe that. And some of them are in Congress that are like true believers. And so Mike Pence, like true believer in that.
Yeah.
Been a cause for him for 50 years. Right. And so that's what you do. And he's made the point that that's more important than losing an election, basically.
Yeah.
That this is a sin. And so that
even though losing an election would open the door for all of that to be overturned then, because I mean, if they lose enough seats, they'll lose control of the states, and then they can have that stuff overturned. If they lose enough seats nationally speaking in the federal government, then we can get some type of federal law codifying Roe.
But I don't know the Bible verse that said, let's do a sophisticated, nuanced compromise. Right? I mean, if you're really, really into that, and in some ways give those people credit for like really believing what they believe. The sort of balancing political interests and all the rest of that is much more complicated. But again, it goes back to, okay, if you're just doing it on the craven political side, what about the primary voter is more important a lot of times than the general election voter, because if you don't win with the primary voter, you don't even get to the general election.
Yeah, perhaps. But I mean, Republicans have to turn around and see, like, the only way to win these elections moving forward is to keep those. I mean, at a bare minimum, keep those soft Republicans, much less those independents who you need. And without those people, you're losing states that you're losing Nevada, you're losing Arizona, you're losing Georgia, you're losing Michigan and Wisconsin.
Well, and I think of all the things that Ron DeSantis has done recently in his bid to win over the Republican base, fighting with Disney, doing all the transgender stuff, Don't Say Gay bill, all of that. The 6-week abortion ban that he signed in Florida is politically the most toxic thing that he's done.
Yeah.
Because it is clear to a general election that could be damaging. That's like a nuclear bomb that could go off in his face.
Yeah.
And you can see the ads now from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and everybody else constantly tying Ron DeSantis to the idea that he wants a 6-week abortion ban. And that is something that could really, really hurt him going forward.
And by the way, he had an out on that issue.
Yeah.
He had a relatively, and I say relative meaning relative to the other abortion bans that are being passed, but he had a relatively moderate abortion ban in a 15-week abortion ban, which, to be clear, is still draconian and completely unacceptable. But relative to what we've seen in a number of other states, that 15-week abortion ban was not so blatant. And then he just went ahead and passed that six-week abortion ban. I don't know that he gained any more support from the far right by virtue of going from 15 weeks to 6 weeks, but I can absolutely guarantee you that he's shed support from those soft Rs and those independents and those Republican-leaning Democrats, whoever they may be, by virtue of going even farther extreme than he even needed to.
Ron DeSantis signing an abortion ban bill makes him radioactive in a lot of swing states. And that is a message that Democrats know how to pound home. That's how they won all the last elections. And by the way, you know who knows that? Donald Trump.
Right.
I mean, Donald Trump, for all of his flaws, and I know your listeners think he have many, he's got a pretty good insight into what people like. That's why he's obsessed with ratings. That's why he's obsessed with crowd size. That's why he acts like a stand-up comic, going out and testing lines in front of audiences to see what works and what doesn't. He understands that most Americans don't like the idea of an abortion ban. Most Americans don't, even though his justices, of course, are the reason that one is put in place. Donald Trump, who was pro-choice for almost his entire life, who, is the guy who got in trouble for sex with the porn star.
Yeah.
Probably not Mr. Anti-abortion for his whole life.
Yeah, but at the same time, he did talk about an unforced error. He came out and basically took full credit for installing those 3 justices who then passed the Dobbs. He's trying to
having
needle.
it both ways, which is what he does for his whole life. And obviously that's an issue he's going to have to talk about later. But I think he knows in his gut, if you look at the way he's acted on abortion, he's tried to stay away from that in a way that other people haven't, because he knows how politically damaging that issue is. Yeah,
I still think that the way that he's undermined his own argument, and he may have had plausible deniability by not coming out and saying the things that Ron DeSantis has said or Ron DeSantis has done, but at the same time, he does, by virtue of speaking freely when he thinks he's just trying to pander to the people in his base, he's already screwed himself by taking full credit for Dobbs. And it's not like that ad isn't going to run on an endless loop if he becomes the nominee from January to November.
And of course, on the actual substance of it, that's ridiculous, because he's more responsible for abortion being illegal than anybody else on the planet, because he's the guy who appointed the justices that overturned it. Yeah. And it wasn't a huge surprise that any of those 3 would have been interested in doing that, despite Susan Collins and her letters that she said that are disturbing. Apparently, Susan Collins wasn't listening or watching the same show that everybody else in the country was.
Yeah, but this goes for everything too, right? He's going to attack Ron DeSantis on earned benefits, on slashing Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. All of Donald Trump's budgets did the exact same thing. So he'll keep hammering DeSantis. And to his credit, he probably knows that most of his base isn't going to fact check. Most of his base isn't going to know. They're just going to listen to Donald Trump say something and then just parrot it. And they're going to say, oh, we'll attack DeSantis on this exact thing because Donald Trump said attack DeSantis on this thing, regardless of the fact that Donald Trump himself is guilty of doing the exact same thing when he was in office.
But the brilliant thing that he's done from a political tactician perspective, not from a journalism perspective or the right thing to do, is just lie about everything.
Right.
So whenever he's called out on something, he just says it's not true.
Yeah.
And
that works for most of his people.
It has worked for his people. The problem is that base is not big enough right now to win a general election.
Yeah.
In order to win the general election, he either needs to convince so many people that Joe Biden is so terrible that you got to come with him, or he's got to find people that didn't vote in previous elections and add them to his base.
Elex, let's get a little bit more local here. You are the guy in California.
Thank you.
And I'm just curious how the California Senate race is shaping up, because we've got 3 exceedingly popular candidates running right now. I think among others maybe, but I'm talking about the three primary candidates. So how's that Senate race going
Well,
right
it's
now?
really interesting. So for people that aren't following that closely, of course, Dianne Feinstein is retiring in 2025. There's been some talk, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are wondering, is she going to retire before then? From every indication I have from everybody that knows her, she is not interested at all in retiring before then. So we think that the race is going to stay the way that it is right now, which is Adam Schiff versus Katie Porter versus Barbara Lee, all 3 very popular Democratic members of Congress from California. There's a Republican named Eric Early, who is an attorney who ran against Adam Schiff for Congress and lost, ran for Attorney General on the Republican side and lost. A recent poll actually showed that Eric Early was in the lead because he's got all the Republicans behind him, and Schiff, Porter, and Lee are breaking up the other Democrats. The real interesting dynamic will be, because the way we do primaries in California is it's not a Democratic primary and a Republican primary. It's an open primary where everybody runs and everybody gets to vote. And then the top 2 face off in November, whether that's Democrat versus Republican, Democrat versus Democrat. You would think that the general election would be Democrat versus Democrat, but can Eric Early get enough votes, enough Republicans behind him to potentially be in the top 2 slot, which would essentially mean that whoever comes as the top Democrat in that primary would then be the senator from California? Or does Eric Early not get enough? Porter and Schiff or Lee or somebody else gets enough to be in the top 2, and then you have a very close, very expensive race going forward. We don't know yet. All the polls show that the race is very close. It's going to be very expensive. California is the biggest, most expensive state with the most voters. We haven't had a competitive Senate race, a real competitive Senate race since 1992. So this state is due for a big, expensive brawl.
And do we have any indication as to whether another Republican will be jumping in, or have Republicans kind of made the tacit decision to allow Early to be their one guy, to have the best chance at consolidating all that power on the right?
Well, I don't think Eric Early is like the GOP choice. I think he's just a guy who wanted to do it.
Yeah.
When I spoke to Kevin McCarthy about this, he was sort of hinting that there were people that they were interested. But the problem is, if you're Kevin McCarthy, like, a Republican is almost certainly not going to win the general election based off of just the registration of California.
Right.
So, like, if you're Kevin McCarthy, you don't want one of your sort of star Republicans from the House to run for this, because it's kind of a suicide mission, right? And so if you're in a competitive race, and a lot of the congressional races in California are close and will be close next time around.
Yeah.
So you want to dedicate your time and money in trying to keep the House majority, which you may not be able to keep. And this Senate race is kind of is bad for you. But also, if you're Kevin McCarthy and it's 2 Democrats at the top of the ticket in November, that hurts down ticket because it doesn't give the Republicans somebody to vote for and makes it less likely for them to vote in the general election, and it increases Democratic performance probably in the House races.
And that was going to be my point. I actually think that Kevin McCarthy has every incentive in the world, even if it means sacrificing somebody. And granted, we know that the House race is going to be close, but if it means sacrificing somebody so that Republicans have the best chance at getting on that final ballot against Adam Schiff or Katie Porter, because if it's Schiff versus Porter, then for the first time probably since 1992, Democrats are going to have so much of an incentive to come out, and that's going to have such major down ballot impacts in a state where we've kind of struggled, except for 2018, where we were able to flip most of Orange County, but otherwise
all
Democrats,
of Orange County.
Yeah, otherwise Democrats have had we've a number of these states that Democrats weren't able to win in 2022 were the result of just kind of whereas we have states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Arizona who were able to turn out because all the attention was on them. A lot of the drawbacks came from New York and California, these liberal bastions, because there wasn't that major race at the top of the ticket to draw all of these people out. If we have that by virtue of a Schiff-Katie Porter Senate race, which, like you said, is probably going to be the most expensive Senate race or one of the most expensive Senate races in the country, then I think that really does redound to Democrats' benefit.
And, of course, the House races in California are close because we do something which I know you don't love that California does, which is nonpartisan commission picks the districts and tries to make them close on purpose. And there isn't gerrymandering in California anymore. We have these super Democratic.
Which, by the way, I'm fine with so long as it's a national standard.
Right. The challenge is you're doing that in the most Democratic state in the country, which results in probably Republicans winning or having a competitive shot at a lot more House districts than they would if Democrats got to draw all the lines. And so because of that, there are, probably 7 to 10 seats in California that are legitimately up for grabs.
Yeah.
And California could determine who's in control of the House next time around.
Yeah, and a Schiff-Porter primary would absolutely draw enough Democrats out to
Schiff-Porter general election.
General election. Well, yeah, sorry. I call it a primary in the sense that I'm thinking about it in terms of that. But the general election, that would draw enough Democrats out and voting to really have some major down ballot impacts here. So it remains to be seen. But judging by what you've seen thus far, and I know this is kind of an impossible question to answer, but what is it looking like at this moment in time? If you had to give a snapshot of now, because obviously you can't predict what's going to happen a year and a half into the future. But as of today, if this election happened, what would it most likely result in?
I think so far Porter and Schiff have demonstrated the most strength when it comes to fundraising.
Between those two,
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's really close.
Or is it just that close?
It's really close.
Like a 50-50?
All of the polls have been close. I mean, we've got a long ways to go. Hopefully, when I get to host the first debate, and it's really influential and everybody tunes in, then we'll get a better sense when you get to see them match up against each other.
Right.
I mean, it's clear one. It's clear that Adam Schiff has most of the institutional Democratic support. He's got Nancy Pelosi behind him. He's got most of the members of Congress. He's got a lot of money, and that is on one side. But it's also clear that Katie Porter has a lot of support from the grassroots, from the Elizabeth Warren kind of Democrats, people that aren't maybe as much as part of the establishment, but love, watching her appearances on MSNBC. And so that's a big chunk of California too. So we really don't know. And it's also in my incentive. I have a lot of incentive to not say, to just be honest. Yeah.
Alex, what are your summer plans here before we get into the storm that is 2024?
Yeah, hopefully to take a little bit of time away from all this stuff, as fun as it is. I mean, really, my goal is to spend as much time with Brian Tyler Cohen as possible.
I hope you enjoy being in this room.
Yeah. Congrats. This is an anniversary episode of your podcast, right? How many years are we at now?
This is the 3-year anniversary. And I remember that this episode right here is the 3-year anniversary of the podcast. And I remember you were the one person that I consulted with before I even started the show, and kind of, you've done your show for how long now? The issue is?
We're at 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
And so just kind of sat down with you to ask what that was like, and yeah.
So week one was Ron Klain, who was out of office, right, and in the wilderness, and did this as a favor to you, right?
Everybody did it. The first 30 guests probably did it as a favor to me, and you still do it. As a favor
no, it's fun. I enjoy it. And so what are your feelings or your thoughts on this third anniversary and what you've built in this community and the people listening now?
Yeah, I'm obviously first and foremost like super grateful for people, especially the people in the beginning, because it was so hard. I mean, it's still really hard to get people, and I know you and I have spoken about this. Like, there are weeks where it's just like, how is it this difficult to get to get somebody to talk to me for 10 minutes? Yeah. But, super grateful for those early people, especially for, Ron Klain and Beto and Eric Swalwell. They were early people who, when nobody else would respond to emails, those people kind of were conversing. Beto came on and just spoke to me directly. Like, he was messaging me directly, and he was like, sure, I'll come on. And there's people like that who I'm very grateful for, because they helped, they kind of just took a risk and they didn't know who I was, some punk YouTuber, Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm, obviously really proud of the way that it's progressed now. It culminated into an interview at the White House, which was pretty awesome. And now I think it's just a great way for, to do what the goal has always been, which is to reach out to a lot more candidates. And I've spoken, in just the last couple weeks to Lucas Kuntz and Colin Allred, who are running against Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz respectively, and to use this platform to kind of introduce my audience to people who I think deserve to be out there and who may not get a fair shake on legacy media, on broadcast media. And so, and there's obviously a lot of eyeballs on independent media, on YouTube, on podcasts and stuff. So it's important to pick up the slack for those people.
And got to be fun also to like sort of dig a little deeper beyond just these sort of short
as opposed
video.
To these 4 or 5 minute cable hits, which are the norm, but a lot of people want to go deeper into the stuff and find out who these people are and what the positions are, as opposed to like 2 sound bites and then move on,
Right. Well, congrats. You've built something really special.
Thank you.
And you've also built a great studio here. Congrats on that, too.
Thank you. And thanks for coming on. And Elex, for those watching, listening, where can we see and hear more from you? All
right. Well, especially great thing to tune into this week is our interview with Brian Tyler Cohen. So if you're already on the fan club, why not tune into that? So if you go to youtube.com/Elex Michaelson, that's ELEX MICHAELSON, you can see our past interview with Brian. I also put out our show in podcast form as well. If you like podcasts, just search for The Issue Is wherever you stream. And I'm at Elex Michaelson and all the social channels too. Would love to hear from you, and especially love if you share out the Brian episode.
Awesome. Elex, as always, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.